Mills, Luke Jones out there sweating it out. Any breaking news will happen first on the WNST tech service. That, of course, brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. And, of course, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, wherever news happens, we will be on the scene for that. Meantime, the Orioles headed north of the border after a quick trip to Minnesota to take on the Blue Jays. It'll be really a battle for first place over the weekend at what I always call Sky Dome, but they call it the Rogers Center. You know, this guy has covered sports in the AP in Cleveland for a long, long time, and things are usually quiet in Cleveland. But then LeBron comes back, they win championships, the Browns are in the toilet, the Indians are in the pennant race, and oh, by the way, he's headed to Rio next week to cover the Olympics. He is a longtime sports writer for the Associated Press, covering the Indians, the Browns, the Cavaliers, and anything else, probably conventions amongst other things. He has a wonderful picture of sliding down a toboggan or a bobsled or a luge. I don't know what the hell it is. Tom Withers. He is T. Withers AP out on Twitter from the land of Cleve. Nothing going on in Cleveland these days, right, Tom? So boring you have to leave the continent and go down to Rio next week, right?
Yeah, really quiet these days, Nestor. Yeah, there's never a dull moment in Cleveland. It's been a summer probably unlike any we've ever had here, but it's been a blast.
Yeah, I would say that, right? I mean, I've been coming to Cleveland for 25 years. I cannot remember any point where it's been more magnificent, more glorious, more large, where Cleveland is not the second city in any way, whether it's parades, whether it's conventions. But the baseball team's pretty good, too, and I don't think the football team's going to be any good, but at least this is the time of the year where they're relevant for the most part, right?
Yeah, you're right. I mean, Cleveland has really undergone a renaissance over the last, probably about 5 or so years, and it kind of reached a crescendo this summer, you know, as you mentioned before, with the Cavs winning the title, the RNC coming here, and, you know, the one kind of, lost stepchild in all this right now is still the Browns, who opened camp on Friday. But, they're optimistic once again, another regime change with a new coach coming on, with a new front office. So, their expectations are not really high this year for them to win, but they're starting to slowly put some things together.
All right, let's just go piece by piece here. Let's start with the Indians because we saw them over the weekend. I'll get to the Browns, and I'll let you brag on the Cavaliers because everyone in Cleveland has done that over the last month and a half, and it was a wonderful parade and all that. For the Indians and where they are this week, and I saw them over the weekend, and obviously it was not a good weekend for the Tribe here, I see them on the cusp of this is the one chance you go all in, right? I mean, the Red Sox have clearly gone all in. Toronto has now spent a little bit. Texas is waiting around. But Cleveland, for me, having seen them, and I know there may be feelings that they don't have to win this year. They have enough young talent there. It's not a one-and-done type of proposition. But this wouldn't be a bad time to sort of go for it. And I know how baseball goes in Cleveland in October. Every night will be a football game there if they make this playoff run.
Yeah, you're right. But I think there's a danger, especially in a market like this, to go all in, to sell out for one season to make a run at a World Series title. Yeah, it's been since 1948, since the Indians won it all. But, they've spent the last 10 years really replenishing this minor league system, and they have got, unbelievable talent from top to bottom. So I think the risk that you take in maybe trading a couple of top prospects for, let's say a Carlos Beltran or a Aroldis Chapman, which didn't happen. But, you can sacrifice years for one season. And I don't think that's what they want to do here. I think they feel like they've got a good enough lineup right now. They obviously have the starting pitching to make a real strong run in the American League. Let's be honest. I mean, with the exception of, your Orioles, who have played very well, and a couple other teams, the AL is wide open. So I think the Indians feel like even if they sat pat, maybe added an arm or two to the bullpen, they've got enough to get to the World Series this year.
Well, they certainly have enough to get to October, right? And then after that, it really is a crapshoot. It's about pitching, and pitching is the one part. Hey, the Orioles didn't even see their best pitchers over the weekend. They have a bunch of – it's amazing feast or famine with these pitchers. We see Colorado come in a couple days later. They have nothing. We'll see Minnesota. They have nothing. You go to Toronto this weekend. They're not in first place, but they have first-place pitching. Certainly have better pitching than the Orioles do, and there's a lot of that going around when your pitching isn't good enough. I guess that's the part that makes me nervous about the Orioles because I realize sort of over 2 or 3 series in October, pitching's going to be where it's at because that's where it's always at that point.
Yeah, that's you're exactly right, Nestor. That's when it catches up to you. And the Indians just have an unbelievable wealth of arms. I mean, they've actually got a couple guys at the back end of the rotation. When you look at a Trevor Bauer who can pitch in relief, who's ultimate destination could be the closer's role down the road. They've got 1 through 4. They are as good as anybody in baseball. I think you'd have a hard time coming up with 4 better arms than the Indians currently have. So I think, to me, where their weaknesses lie right now is in the back end of that bullpen. They really need a left-handed 7th and 8th inning guy. Their closer Cody Allen has done a nice job. He's been overused at times by Francona, then underused based on what their schedule has been. And they could use another bat. And, people forget, too, that, all-star Michael Brantley has been out, 90% of the season so far.
Yeah, and the press very nebulous, right, with him. I mean, we learned that over the weekend. Like, he might be there, he might not be there, but why go by Beltran if he's going to come back? But even if he comes back, September 15th, what does that mean?
Well, yeah. Well, as Tito Francona has said to me this week, having Michael Brantley back for 2 out of 3 games is better than 0 out of 3 games. So I think they look at Brantley, if he's able to come back, as a guy that they can, certainly use and, start him when they need to, bring him off the bench as a pitch hitter when they need to, and just having him around the team is a good thing. We've been talking to some of the younger players over the last couple of weeks who've talked about how valuable Brantley has been just as a sounding board, just as a veteran who's been through enough of this to tell some of these younger players like Tyler Naquin, what kind of approach he should have on a day-to-day basis and how much he can help him out with certain pitchers. So, this is a very interesting team. It's a nice blend of youth with a couple of veterans sprinkled in, guys like Mike Napoli, who has really provided an unbelievable spark in his first season here. And in Terry Francona, I don't have to tell you, Nestor, you have one of the best managers in baseball, a guy who's, has an uncanny ability to get out not only the best out of his players, but knows when to push them, when to pull back a little bit. And as we know from his time in Boston, he knows how to get things done in October.
He is Tom Withers, T. Withers, AP, out on Twitter, covering all things sports in the land of Cleve, and headed to Rio next weekend as well. You mentioned the Indians and where they sit right now, and they feel to be the safest of all the American League teams, certainly safer than the Orioles at this point as a first-place team. Are you shocked by the year they've had this year? And maybe even more, I'm more shocked that Detroit, Chicago, Kansas City have been where they are. Certainly Minnesota. I don't think anybody saw them playing as poorly as they've played. I'm a little shocked that it's become a little bit of a runaway at this point, and that these other teams, even Chicago trying to fortify, Kansas City coming off the championship year, that they have faded in such an ugly fashion over the last 2 months.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think I'm more stunned by Kansas City's drop than Cleveland's rise. And, the Indians were able to reel off 14 straight games. And when you put 14 straight wins, rather, when you put a winning streak together like that, you're able to buy yourself a little bit of time. And then you can kind of, you're going to have those expected 5 and 6 game losing streaks that every team goes through. You hope to keep them minimized and not let them get any longer than that. But when you put together a winning streak like that, man, you're sitting pretty good. You only have to play 500 ball the rest of the way to have a legitimate chance of winning the division. So I've really been stunned by what's happened to the Royals. That's a better team. First of all, it's a much better lineup than they've played lately, and their pitching has gone south. Detroit, I think, is still a dangerous team. That's a team that's still able to out-hit a lot of its mistakes, and they don't have the pitching staff that they had, 2, 3, and 4 years ago. But that's still a very dangerous team. And, the White Sox kind of came back to the pack, which I expected, and Minnesota has just not been able to get it going. So I thought this Indians team had, the capabilities of winning 85 to 90 games. And at this point right now, it looks like they're going to do even better than that.
All right, and meanwhile, the Browns begin, their run, and they're obviously the biggest banana there, but don't tell LeBron and the Cavs that or the Indians that. But the hope is nowhere other than, can we get to 6 or 7 wins? Can we look like an NFL team? And can we find a quarterback, right? And the RG3 thing, I don't need to tell you, I'm in the corridor here, and, Dave Scheinen, my buddy at the Post, wrote a book about RG3, and, the book kind of ended when the book came out. There's been no story on him. I know Hugh Jackson has kind of bet all in on him. They had opportunities in the draft to do different things at the top of the board that they didn't do. And the Johnny Manziel thing starts to feel a little bit more rearview mirror at this point now, right?
Yeah, no question. And that was long overdue. I don't have to tell you that. So, yeah, RG3 is an interesting story. I think Hugh Jackson, who has a great and proven track record with developing young quarterbacks, feels like he can do something with RG3 and get him back to what we saw in Washington a couple of years ago. There's still some rust, some rust that RG3 is going to have to knock off in training camp. The Browns did take Cody Kessler in the third round, the quarterback from USC, and they have real high expectations for him. Excuse me. And then, there's still Josh McCown, who did a more than a serviceable job last year without very many weapons. I think the Browns still see him as a viable option should RG3 fall flat during training camp and the exhibition season. So they've got some options. None of them are real great at this point, but I think it's all about seeing whether or not RG3 can resurrect his career here. The Browns did a decent job of adding some wide receivers, albeit rookie ones in the draft, kids like Corey Coleman, who looks to be the real deal, the first-round pick out of Baylor. So the Browns have some interesting pieces. It's just a matter of whether or not Hugh Jackson can fit them together and how long it's going to take him to do that.
Josh Gordon, it contributed to other coaches and executives getting fired. Where are we with him? There's this thought that he's such an incredible difference maker that if he ever got on the field, it remains to be seen for me when a guy can't get on the field, that when he finally does get on the field, that he's going to go out there and be a world beater that we remember him being what feels like several years ago now, right?
Yeah, you're right. 2013, you could argue there was no more rising star in the NFL than Josh Gordon, who, despite playing only 14 games that season, rolled up 1,646 yards to lead the NFL. He became a difference-making, game-changing player every time he touched the ball. Well, then he had the suspension the following year, had to sit out 10 games, and when he came back, he just wasn't the same guy. And then now last year, he sat out the entire season. So, while now he's been reinstated on a conditional basis by Roger Goodell, it remains to be seen what Gordon has. I think it's a very tough thing for any athlete, never mind a superior one like Josh Gordon, to walk right back on an NFL field and be productive from the get-go. So, that one it's been a very curious story. It doesn't seem like, it seems like the NFL has almost kind of made things up as they've gone along in terms of their rules and policies and how to enforce them with Josh Gordon's case. There's been a lot of stuff behind the scenes that we haven't been privy to, failed drug tests, diluted drug tests, all kinds of things. So, in my mind, the Browns got to really think that one through. And if you're Hugh Jackson and you're trying to change a culture, do you go back to a guy like this who has been, nothing short of a distraction for the last 3 seasons?
Well, he didn't get Hugh fired. He got him hired, quite frankly, but he got 2 coaches fired now. Tom Withers, T. Withers, AP, covering all things, the land of Cleveland's worth. So I just want to give this to you. Maybe we can mesh this thing together here. You've covered a couple of Olympics and Super Bowls and all sorts of things. Give me the lowdown on what you've seen with your eyes over the last 8 weeks in your own hometown, where you live and breathe every day. And I've wondered aloud what a Democratic or a Republican National Convention would look like in Baltimore. We would have had the All-Star game here last year. We haven't had that now in 23 years, and our owners' greed and infighting with the owners cost us the All-Star game last week. We're waiting for that sort of gathering here. Cleveland's had a couple of those, including the parade that was incredible and the convention. This will be a year Cleveland will never forget, right?
No question about it, Nestor. In fact, it's been since June 17th that the Cavs won the championship, and there's some days where it feels like yesterday, just in the way people are, still walking around on air. It's just been an unbelievable moment for this city, after you wait a half century for a championship and then you finally get one, and then, the city reacted the way that it did. There were not the problems that people expected. There were not the problems during the RNC that people expected. This city, as I mentioned before, is really on the rise, and it's been really a nice thing to see this summer, just the way the entire community is kind of come together. And, everybody can kind of thank LeBron James, I think, for that. And, I still talk to people, again, we're almost, we're a month and change since they won the championship, and people that are still going back and watching Game 7 2 and 3 times a week just to relive it, because it's a moment no one here will ever forget, and it was a long time in coming, and that's why people now are thirsty for more. That's why they want to see the Indians, potentially make a run at a championship this year. I've always maintained that the team that would win it in Cleveland and end the drought would kind of come out of nowhere, and that's essentially what the Cavaliers did. They became the first team in the history of the finals to come back from a 3-1 deficit, and I always felt that once that curse and drought, or whatever you want to call it, was broken, it'd be a lot easier on the other teams in town. And that seems to be the case. It seems like the Indians are kind of riding that Cavs wave, and we'll just have to see how far it can take them.
How much money has this cost you in swag? I've asked everyone from Cleveland that because when you don't have anything in your closet that says World Champs, I guess unless you're an Ohio State fan, right? You tend to go a little nuts. I mean, some of my pals out there, Ryder and Reg Eye and those guys have told me it's turned into a shanty town, much like Baltimore. Little purple shanties popped up on every corner, selling World Championship everything. I'm sure it's the same scene in Cleveland since June, right?
Yeah, you can't walk 5 feet without seeing somebody with a Cavs jersey on. I mean, it's really remarkable. And, I've got an 18-year-old son who has managed to load up his closet here over the last couple of weeks with, everything from the J.R. Smith fake, body shirt to, whatever the latest LeBron, sneaker is, or Kyrie Irving T-shirt, or whatever the case may be. But, yeah, people are just, again, they're just caught up in it, and you can't blame them. I mean, there's been generations of Cleveland fans who have waited for this, and now they're living in it. And they, when I was in New York and covered the Yankees, I was always reminded by people that, these are the good old days, and to savor them because you're not going to get them back. And I think that's exactly what Clevelanders are doing this summer.
My favorite shirt that I saw during the RNC, out on 4th Street, hanging out behind people where all the talking heads were, was the Cleveland Leg Lamp Cavaliers edition with LeBron James's leg as the leg in the leg lamp. I thought, now that is mixing some of my favorite Cleveland traditions right there.
Yeah, there's been some clever stuff that's come along the road here, but yeah, like I said before, I think everybody is just kind of, embracing it. It's a new Cleveland. It's kind of a new, fresh start for everybody here, and I think it's a model for the rest of the country to follow.
Hey, and Trump and his buddies didn't burn the city down last week, and now you're going down to Rio. And speaking of political unrest, nervous at all about this? I mean, how many Olympics for you? I mean, you've been to Sochi. I know you've been places. This is a little bit of a different Olympics because of the politics, the police, the Russians. I mean, we're not lacking, not to mention Michael Phelps and everything else you're going to cover while you're there, but this is not lacking for, I guess, controversy and in the middle of our own political unrest up here. It's going to be a weird month. I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm glad I'm not going, and but I am glad you're going and at least reporting on it, Tom.
Yeah, I'm a little nervous, I'll be honest. This will be my 10th Olympics. I've been very lucky and fortunate to be chosen to go. And I do have some anxiety about going down there. Mostly because of not the civil unrest, but the political unrest they've had down in Brazil. They essentially had a coup d'etat about 4 months ago. So. And there's all kinds of corruption and there's crime. But, my experience has been that, the Olympics are typically a very safe environment. There'll be security there from all over the world helping the IOC and helping the Brazilian authorities keep everything safe. So, I'm just going to say a prayer and keep my head on a swivel and hope everything works out.
You've been to Rio before?
I have not.
I have been. Yeah, man. Be careful, but it is beautiful. Now, I'm not going to lie to you, but hey, have a great time down there. I'll be following your journey at T Withers AP. I'll get everybody else out there following you on Twitter. Send back some good pictures and some good posts, and don't get any mosquito bites. Take some bug repellent there, okay?
I promise to. Thanks, Nestor. Appreciate it.
You got it. Tom Withers. He is T. Withers, AP, sports writer for the Associated Press. He covers all things Ohio and Cleveland sports, but he is going down to the Olympics next week as well for the Associated Press. You can find me, Nasty, at WNST.net, out on the internet, anywhere the internet is served. And, of course, to buy a Toyota Audio Vault there for you 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device. Download the TuneIn Radio app. We come in crystal clear. And our morning newspaper hits your email inbox at 7 a.m. each and every morning. That's powered up by Planet Fitness. That's box score, standings, headlines. All of it comes to you first. We're full serve around here at WNST. And last but never least, breaking news, anything happens at Ravens training camp or the Orioles make a deal before the deadline, you get it first on the WNST Tech Service. It is all brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST Taos in Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports. Tom, great having you on, man. Thanks. WNST, tap north of the border spot of Toronto, where bad things have happened in the past. I hope nothing bad happens this weekend for sure. But the Orioles battling for first place, and the Ravens are on the back fields now, sweating it out. Luke Jones and I will be there all weekend, all week, all month, as training camp now in full bloom. And this gives me a great opportunity to span the globe to bring you the constant variety of NFL coverage. 31 other places. This lady here will be in a bunch of places on the East Coast, including Baltimore on Monday for our little fireworks and a military get-together down at the Purple Crab Cake. She has covered the NFL for a number of years now with the MMQB. And my dear pal, Peter King, she's a senior writer for Sports Illustrated as well. She is Jenny Vrentas. You can follow her out on Twitter. That is spelled Vrentas. Does anybody ever say they want to buy a vowel?